Hey, Katie.
Hi, Emily.
How's it going?
It's going well.
You ready for our final Pontificating Potter with the Pastors?
I'm sad because I enjoy it, but
Yeah.
I imagine that this is just the last time we will be filmed pontificating Harry Potter.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. We decided to film this because this is just what we already did in our spare time. Take that out if it sounds too dorky.
Okay. So one of the reasons that I really like Harry Potter in general, and that I like us study, I mean, that's not maybe that, well, I like us spending time in it, exploring it as a church, as a people of faith, is the reason that I like doing that with all stories. That I think stories give us a lens to view our world and experience our world and to examine our world differently. I think that we find truth in stories that then is easy to translate to the lives that we live in, the world that we live in.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think they give us characters that you can sort of climb around inside and experience the world with them in a way that maybe is you might be able to explore an idea in a less threatening way in a story than if somebody just came at you with this, concept or idea or whatever. Instead, you get to watch a character wrestle with it.
I've always I love the Bible. I mean, I think that's not a unique thing to love the Bible.
I mean, certainly not in our profession or religion.
But I think that's one of the reasons that I love the Bible is exactly that reason too. It's why I would maybe tend to keep my feet in the Old Testament if given the opportunity, because I think the stories do exactly that, what you said. They are more story-like and that you can live inside.
And you have longer characters in the Old Testament too. You can trace a character for a long time, whereas
a parable is a paragraph.
A parable is this long, right? Yeah. I mean, you still get to climb around in those characters.
Absolutely.
But yeah, you don't attach to them.
No. So, because we love that about Harry Potter, and we love that about the Bible, for our last time, it just made sense to see where the Venn diagram was. In those two stories.
Yeah, so literally we're deciding which Harry Potter characters align with which biblical characters.
Which is fun.
Yeah, it's a really fun game. We recommend you play along with us.
Absolutely.
We'd love to, at the end we'll ask you a question, and I suspect it will be, send us your ideas.
Of which parallels there are between biblical characters and wizarding world characters.
I know we started this because both of our favorite characters, I think in both the Bible and in the Harry Potter series, are our first pair, which is Professor Lupin and Barnabas.
Yes. Barnabas is one of my all-time favorite characters in the Bible.
Find Barnabas in the Book of Acts.
Yes, wildly under-celebrated character in Scripture, I think. That's Paul's fault.
Absolutely. Paul gets all the attention, even though he has really a very impressive cast of characters around him.
Absolutely. So in Scripture, Paul, you have to start with Paul to even tell Barnabas' story.
It's unfortunate. But
so Barnabas is one of the he's a follower of Christ, right? He is one of the early church disciples that is all up in everything else that's going on, and he's a respected voice.
Yeah.
I think he's probably a little older than some of the others, and he's definitely a respected voice within that crowd. And Paul, when he was still Saul, is a Pharisee that is, holding the coats while Stephen's getting stoned, right? Yeah. So he is advocating for the persecution of the early church. And so then we all know about Paul's conversion experience, but then Paul kind of goes away over here, and it's Barnabas that goes and gets him. And Barnabas goes and finds him where he is, and then he says, he spends time with them. He, I think, trains him in some ways in what it is to be a disciple of Christ. And then he takes him back to the other disciples, and he vouches for Paul.
Nice.
And he says, nope, this guy is one of us now.
Right.
And we're all going to be okay with him.
Right.
And this is fine. And then it goes in you watch Paul and Barnabas go together in Scripture. In all of the places at first, it says Barnabas and Paul, Barnabas and Paul, Barnabas and Paul.
Yeah.
And then Paul gives one really good sermon, and it flips their names. And then everywhere after that, it's Paul and Barnabas, Paul and Barnabas, Paul and Barnabas.
Right.
And then at some point they get into a fight. I could talk about this for a long time. At some point they get into a fight, and they go their separate ways. And Luke, the writer of Acts, goes with Paul, and so we continue to hear that story, and we can assume that Barnabas continues to be awesome,
right,
and continues to.
A lot of us are probably here because of Barnabas.
A lot of us are probably here because of Barnabas, but his story doesn't continue to get told because the writer went with Paul. Mm-hmm. So I think that Barnabas is like the wind beneath the wings of the epistles. Yeah. I think he's the wind beneath the wings of much of the New Testament gospel. The guy that will vouch for the person that everybody hates. And I think Lupin, I don't know.
It makes me wonder if Paul is serious. Like he's in jail a lot, kind of gets a lot of the attention.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah.
But I think Lupin is kind of the wind beneath the wings too, right?
Oh, absolutely. Of the order of, even of the students, like that seems to be what he really strives for, is to be the wind beneath their wings.
And the thing about Barnabas, I think, is like, even at that moment where that flips and it goes from being Barnabas and Paul to Paul and Barnabas, like, I just really believe that Paul could care less. Yeah. Because I don't think he has ever sought the spotlight. Mm-hmm. And I don't think Lupin does either.
No, and I do think, like, Lupin is also this sort of almost an outsider character, right? Yeah. Because he's a werewolf, and so, like, and Barnabas takes this more marginal role, and Lupin occupies this more marginal space, but they both do it, like, with this great integrity and leadership and encouragement.
Yeah, I think that's, like, I know that their stories aren't the same.
Right.
Like, there are other characters that maybe their stories are more crossover, but I think that the thing that they both do that is just, if you had like one word character trait, it's like the encourager. Yeah. Right? And I think they both do that wholeheartedly. They are the encourager of everyone else that is a part of those movements with them. So, yeah.
Yeah. Lupin and Barnabas. So one of our other favorite characters, I feel like I'm going to say that too much. Maybe I'm going to oversay it. We've picked a lot of our favorite characters for this particular exercise.
No, we did not pick, I don't know, Augustus Rookwood.
No, we
right?
don't really know much about. I mean, that is a character. He's a Death Eater.
Yeah, I know. That's why, like, we only picked the good ones.
Oh yeah.
We didn't
absolutely.
pick people.
Except for we do have one Death Eater on here, but you'll see. But Hagrid, we really love Hagrid. You meet Hagrid early on in the stories. Hagrid is with us for a long time. And we were thinking about who Hagrid is. Like, Hagrid is in many ways so kind, but he's just so rough around the edges. Yeah. Such that he even lives, like, literally around the edges. He has to live outside the castle. And so we talked about the prophet Jeremiah for him. Also pretty rough around the edges.
Yes.
And thought to be sort of wild. Mm-hmm. But both, like, really essential characters in the moment that they're in. Both truth tellers, both helpers to movements. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And they both cry all the time.
They both cry all the time. I think that's probably one of their most
consistent qualities.
But I also think that Jeremiah brings hope.
Yeah.
And I think that Hagrid does that too, for sure. I think that he is, and Hagrid like he even sees hope where other, like, when the thing I'm thinking about is, like, when the kids are just like, Snape, he's the worst, like, clearly it's awful Snape, and he's like, come on, like,
give it a minute.
Yeah, like, it's Snape.
It's Snape. Here's what he helped you with this. Yeah. He's a teacher, like. Yeah.
Like, he's the bright sider.
Yeah.
I don't know if Jeremiah's.
Yeah, he's not super bright-sided, but he does. He does offer hope, just, like, in a really aggressively heavy way, in a way that Hagrid probably keeps it lighter.
Yeah. They've both seen dark things.
They have both seen dark things.
All right, well, speaking of Death Eaters.
Yeah. All right. So, this is a little bit of a weird one, but I think Bellatrix Lestrange equals Samson of Samson and Delilah Because the hair is full of secrets.
The hair is full of secrets. The power is in Samson's hair.
Yes.
Is the power in Bellatrix's hair?
I feel like it might be. Like, I think if you cut her hair off, she's no good to anybody.
I think you could be right about it.
I think I'm right.
Is the crazy in her hair?
Obviously. The crazy is trying to escape through her hair. Yeah.
But they both, sometimes when we think about Samson, we think about him as being heroic.
Yes. Like he's a positive character.
He is a hero of the Bible.
Whereas Bellatrix
is not. But I just really question his heroicism.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a word.
Yeah.
Heroics.
His heroics. Yeah. I question it because...
Heroism.
His heroism.
Yes.
There you go. I question his heroism because, like, he just murders so many people.
He does. Yeah. He does.
As does
Bellatrix.
Yeah.
They both have, like, no regard for the opposition.
No, and every time his power is shown, it is in just absolutely taking people out with jawbones and donkeys and columns. And
they're both super thirsty for power in ways that, like, make them ruthless.
Yes. Yeah. And bring their demise.
Yeah, actually.
Yeah.
Huh, maybe more alike than we even realized.
Also, when he dies, like, it's because he pulls the columns down and the building falls apart.
Right.
She dies in the Battle of Hogwarts, where all of the building is falling down.
Apart.
Yeah. So I have one. Okay. And this one, there's a lot of ways that you could say that they're not alike.
Okay.
But I'd like to make an argument for how they are alike.
Okay.
So this is Aberforth.
Okay.
Dumbledore.
Yes.
And Joseph of Arimathea.
No, I'll go with you on that, for sure.
I mean...
Interesting.
In the ways that they're not alike is Joseph is like a classy guy.
Right. Kind of fancy.
Yeah, has money and power.
Probably more Albus Dumbledore in personality.
Yeah.
But behavior is definitely Aberforth.
And it's that they both are willing to step into... and where they have not necessarily been a part of the battle the whole time.
Right.
And maybe have intentionally been hands-off in the battle the whole time. When things get sticky, they both step in and they both offer real assistance and
tangible things
and face assistance. Now we're going to show up with our whole selves into this fight. That we really do believe in. Right. So
I think they also both like struggle with their belief in the fight, right? Like they definitely believe in it, but like they've seen some stuff and they're part of other, like Joseph of Arimathea is part of this whole other sort of class of society, and so yes, they believe in it, but they struggle with that belief.
For sure.
I like that one. I don't know. I think we need to decide.
Okay.
You know that I adore Professor McGonagall. She's like my favorite character.
I do.
Love her. Like when she calls the statues, it's the best.
Yes.
I also have a real soft spot for Dame Maggie Smith.
Yeah.
So it helps. I think we've discussed that she is either Deborah or Lydia, and I feel like both are possible, and maybe she's like a mush of them. Both really awesome women of the Bible, in a story that doesn't get like as many women mentions as men mentions.
Sure.
And so both like really heroic characters, but in really different ways.
So let us remember that it's very possible, probable even, that the 7 people that watch this video tops might know more about McGonagall than Deborah or Lydia.
Oh, true. Yeah. So women don't get a lot of attention in the Bible, which means you don't know much about these women. So Deborah is a character from the Old Testament. You can read her story in Judges 4 and 5-ish. And she is a prophetess and a judge. She's the only female judge that is identified as sitting over Israel during the period of the judges. And judges during that time, I mean, they would literally sit at city gates and like pronounce judgments over disputes.
Yeah. I'm mad at my neighbor.
Right.
Can you decide which of us is right about this?
And so they tended to be people who were wise, ideally, right? Like there were, there can always be some corruption in that, but tended to be people who were wise, who were seen as community leaders. And so Israel, they're constantly getting attacked from everywhere. And
the whole book of Judges is just a
they battle. Just get taken over repeatedly and then coming back and then getting taken over and coming back. And so anyway, she goes to Barak and says, hey, rally the troops, go to Mount Tabor, you're going to mount an offensive against Sisera. And he's like, nah, that's not a good idea. And then she says, no, really do it. And he said, okay, I'll do it, but I'll only do it if you come with me. And so she says, okay, yeah, I'll go with you. But like, just know that then the Lord is going to deliver Israel into like this land and this power into the hand of a woman. And he says, okay, come with me. And so they go. And I mean, long story short, they win. Like Deborah inspires them and they win their battle. And she sings a song about their victory and what it means. And yeah, it's really, I mean, there's only a handful of women in the Old Testament who really get named at all.
So this is why I think Deborah.
Okay.
Is, and I think the reason that that you might hesitate to say Deborah, you might just go, oh yeah, well, McGonagall fought in the Battle of Hogwarts.
She did, right. She's a leader. She inspired people in it. But
and
like,
she's
yeah.
like, but like lots of people fought in the Battle of Hogwarts. But this is because the movie gets split, right? So I think that this first one actually happens in the first movie. When does Harry actually show up at Hogwarts?
They don't get to Hogwarts till the second movie.
Oh, okay, well, never mind. Well, when they get
at
there,
the beginning, and then
Snape is standing at the front, and she steps in, and she starts, they get in their little wand battle, and he flies out the window. It is McGonagall that is in charge in that moment.
True.
I mean,
even though she doesn't have the official power in that moment, she takes it.
Right, and that it is her that people are like, maybe she's not like the general of their army, but that's because they're decentralized and they don't have a general of their army, right, for the Battle of Hogwarts.
If they did, it would be her.
Yeah, I think they would.
That's fair. Okay, I'll buy that. The other person I thought was maybe Lydia. Like, Lydia also doesn't get enough mention in the Bible. You can read about her very briefly in the book of Acts. But what it does tell us about her really does tell us a lot about her. Like, she was a woman of some means and, like, status in her community, which is somewhat true of McGonagall, right? Like, I don't know about her financial wealth, but, like, is certainly very respected in the Hogwarts community and in the wizarding world. And Lydia's role, it really is to sort of help the disciples make inroads with people. Like, she has the relationships that they need, and she has the means to actually make sure they eat and have a place to stay. And so she has her own business, so she's clearly smart and wise in the ways of the world, and has found a way to provide for herself in a time when frankly most women didn't, which is in some ways true of McGonagall too. Like, she has sort of made her own way. Like, if you read some of the like Pottermore stuff about McGonagall, that gives you a little more of her story. Like, she's really made her own way.
A seller of purple cloth.
A seller of purple cloth.
Is Lydia,
yes.
McGonagall's a fashionable lady.
She is a fashionable lady. She likes to wear a nice dress with her pointy hat, and
she has multiple different
She has lots
hats.
of robes too that are like adorned. Yeah.
I didn't mean to just talk about what they wear and undercut the awesomeness of both Lydia and McGonagall.
No. I think they're both awesome. So you decide. Tell us what you think.
Okay, so Hermione. I mean, we can't just leave Hermione off in our
ever,
right? Yeah. But speaking of I am sure that there are women all throughout the Bible that are as strong and witty and educated and brave and logical,
right?
And loyal as Hermione is. But like you said, many of their stories don't get told.
Just didn't get told.
But one that we do know is wildly loyal, as is the Gryffindor Hermione, loyalty being such an important characteristic of Gryffindors. Whatever. Is Ruth.
Ruth, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I do think they have a lot of similarities. I mean, loyalty being the obvious one. But, I think Hermione's loyalty gets tested more than a lot of people's, and she doesn't necessarily get credit for it because she is from a Muggle family. And so, the way that the Weasleys and some of the other folks, they're all involved in a thing with their family, and Hermione's family is not a part of any of that. And then when the time comes, and she has to really decide,
she disappears her family.
Yeah,
she
sends them to another country,
erases their memory, and just very much says,
like erases their entire memory of her. It makes it where she doesn't exist.
She never
so
existed.
They can't get in trouble.
And it is. I mean, that is not a choice that Ruth makes, but
right.
They both say, "Your people will be my people."
Right. I will go where you go.
I will go where you go, and they enter into that.
All in
willingly.
Yeah.
And, So now that we've done Hermione, I feel like we have to do Harry. I feel like this is one that gets talked about.
Like whenever Christians start talking about Harry Potter, like they end up doing this thing that clearly neither of us are into, because you can tell by our
size.
Like with Harry Potter as a Christ figure, and I get where it comes from.
So Harry dies,
sacrifices himself on behalf of his friends.
Goes
which
into
is legit,
on his own, dies all the way dead, it appears.
Yeah, it appears.
In some way.
Yeah, I mean, that's the part that's iffy to me.
Yeah, it's iffy to a lot of people in the Christ story, too, so.
Fair. That's a fair point.
And then comes back to life, and comes back and is present with his friends.
With his friends again.
So, but why are we iffy on this? I am too.
We're iffy, I think, because, like, first of all, like, Harry is a very flawed character. In many ways, right? So he doesn't, like, none of what surrounds the Christ story really surrounds Harry's story. I mean, he is, like, a teacher to his friends and, like, gathers a really loyal following.
But he's crappy at times, too.
He is. He's kind of the worst sometimes.
I think, too, that, so this is the difference in, like, this story and, like, the Chronicles of Narnia.
Mm-hmm.
So when Aslan gets cast as the God/Christ character in Chronicles of Narnia, it was written that way.
It's
an intentional allegory that it is trying to point you that way. Right. And so Aslan's character never wavers from being that character of God, of Christ, right? And so yes, Harry and Jesus have some things in common, but you can't make the comparison because Jesus's character never ever wavers.
Right. Well, I mean, it does waver, like, at moments, right? Like, he never becomes not Christ, right? Like, but, like, Jesus, like, I mean, so I'm
saying that Jesus is God all of the time.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
yes,
Jesus is never
not God.
Jesus is never not God.
And Harry never is God.
Right.
Yeah.
And Jesus, and that Jesus is characteristic, like, Jesus is consistent in his character, in just who he is in the world the whole time that he's in the world.
Right.
And that's not the truth of Harry.
Right.
And so
I will say, in fairness of Harry, we didn't know Jesus during his angsty teenage years.
Well, true.
But I don't think he would have,
Well, I mean, if you want to go that way, though, then what about the cursed child? Like, he doesn't end up being the greatest dad.
Right.
Not. He struggles.
He struggles.
Yeah. Yeah, that's not... So, I love Harry.
Right.
Very much.
Yeah, me too.
I just love Jesus more.
Right. So it might just be that we sort of chafe at the comparison always, especially when it is, like, unintentional and a little bit more... I also think, I mean, I don't want to speak for you, but I feel like we've talked about before how we're both a little leery of other sorts of, like, the belief that sacrificial pain or sacrificial death that is not Jesus is effective and helpful, right? Like, we don't sacrifice people for the sake of a cause.
Yeah.
And so, like, Jesus is, like, there is no redemptive suffering on behalf of the world that, like, Jesus does that and it's done. Mm-hmm. And we no longer force people. We don't believe that we should force people into suffering. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, I don't love the way that is sort of impressed upon Harry, and he really, doesn't get a choice.
Well, yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed.
To be fair, just to be clear, we don't think it's a great metaphor.
Yeah.
It's fine, but it's not a great metaphor.
Yeah. So, I think the thing that Harry Potter Month has done for me this time, I think it's been clear in just the things that we've talked about is, like, diving back into these stories, spending time in them. I have come to appreciate the Weasleys just as a whole in a different way than I ever have before.
Yeah.
And I've loved, it's not that I didn't love Molly before or I've always liked them, but just appreciated who they are as a whole and what they, just who they are to Harry, but who they are in the world, and just how they all hold that and kind of get demeaned for it sometimes, that Weasleys are right, and they're like, no, we are Weasleys, and that means something, and it means something for who we are in the world, because they all are like that.
Yes,
except for
Percy,
who's the
worst.
Yes.
I mean, there's always one.
There's always one. So we're just going to say that Percy is Judas,
and
then we're going to move on.
We're just going to move on
to all the other Weasleys. So
or at least most of them. I mean, Bill and Charlie don't get a lot of mention, so we'll skip them.
We'll skip them too. But let's go with since we've already done Hermione and Harry.
We should talk about Ron. Yeah, I mean, especially if we're going to think of Jesus as a Christ figure, even though we don't really think that. I think the obvious character for Ron is John, the disciple whom Jesus left.
So I think so too. I think that every time that I read in John and it says the disciple who Jesus loved, I just kind of roll my eyes a little bit.
Yeah.
But if I was reading it through the voice of Ron, I would just laugh.
Yeah.
I would just think it was funny, because Ron's funny, and I think he doesn't take himself too seriously.
Right.
Though John does take himself very
seriously.
Very
seriously.
But John's also can be really competitive.
Oh, yeah.
Racing Peter to the tomb and having to point out that he got there first.
Yes. Oh, my gosh. Yes.
Yeah, and that sounds like something that
feels like a solid Ron move.
Do for his brothers, too. Also, we know that John has a brother.
Right.
James.
Right.
But also, when we meet James and John, we also meet Peter and Andrew, and they all kind of go together. Peter, Andrew, James, and John.
They kind of have this crew, like the Weasleys
so
have.
It seems like maybe there's more brothers there.
Right.
Even if they're not.
And they are these sort of loyal disciples, right? They're faithful to each other for the most part.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, yeah.
So sidekick Ron. Yeah.
We were trying to think of the twins, of Fred and George, and, they're funny characters.
Yeah.
So we were trying to think of biblical twins.
So I can think of 3 biblical twins.
Yep. We'd have to fact check maybe a 4th, but.
Yeah, I'm not willing to commit on the 4th, but there is a disciple that is mentioned as also called Didymus, which means the twin, but we don't know anything about the other twin, so that doesn't really count in that one. I mean, it counts, but not a good comparison to Fred and George. And then we have Jacob and Esau, but they hated each other.
And Fred and George are best friends.
And so I'd like to read you
a story you probably do not know.
Who I believe that is the best example of biblical twins that compares to Fred and George. So this is the children of Tamar.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's in Genesis 38, starting in verse 27. It says, "When the time of her delivery came, there were twins in her womb. While she was in labor, one put out a hand, and a midwife took and bound on his hand a crimson thread, saying, 'This one came out first.' But just then he drew back his hand, and out came the other brother, and she said, 'What a breach you have made for yourself.' Therefore he was named Perez," which means breach. "Afterwards his brother came out with the crimson thread on his hand, and he was named Zerah," which means brightness.
Whoa.
It just seems like a prank that Fred and George
it's a prank.
Pull.
And it tortures their mother, which is something they also like to do.
There's not a lot to do.
Yeah, we don't learn a whole lot. I mean, Perez goes on a little bit in this story, but not a lot.
Yeah, you don't really know.
Perez ends up actually in Jesus' lineage, but we don't know much about him. It seems like a really good prank, and Fred and George would do it.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so Jenny.
Oh, Jenny.
So I'm going to say that Jenny is like Mary Magdalene.
Yeah.
And not just because,
she has a little bit of a reputation.
Yeah.
So Jenny is unmerited.
Right. Jenny is just she's just a confident woman that has a healthy dating life. But
and a lot of dude friends for a while there.
A lot of dude friends, but not worthy of a reputation of ill repute.
Right. Same with Mary Magdalene. Had a reputation of ill repute, totally unwarranted. If you ever hear somebody tell you that, you can tell them that I said they're wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing I think about that is a good comparison between the two of them is with Ginny, it's always like Harry, Ron, Hermione, Harry, Ron, Hermione, Harry, Ron, Hermione. But as soon as Ginny is a little bit older, like she's there all the time.
Yeah.
And especially, I mean, I guess not when they're out hunting Horcruxes and stuff, but like she is just, when they are all together, she is just as much a part of that trio, like that crowd.
Well, when she's back at Hogwarts during that time, like she is organizing there.
She's doing the things that they would be doing if they were there, but she is very much a part of that. And I think, I mean, obviously, like in the epilogue, we see that they're together, right? And so, but that I think that after the Battle of Hogwarts, I can just assume that continued and that they were just together all the time. Yeah. And I think Mary Magdalene was too.
Right.
I think she was just as much a part of that crowd, just as close.
A leader,
A leader just as close as to all those people. I think that history kind of writes her out of that space. But yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I think, I mean, we've already talked a lot about Molly, but we haven't talked about Arthur at all. And he is also a great character.
Yes.
A great, great character. And so I'm going to say Peter, but I mean a specific thing, right? Because do you think he's like Peter in every way? I don't know. Maybe.
I do think like he is in that like Peter. Yeah, no, I wouldn't have said this, but now that you just asked me, I'm thinking of other examples. Like Peter is ready to pull out his sword and cut off the ear in Gethsemane, and Arthur and Lucius get in a fight, a physical altercation in the bookstore.
Yeah,
right. So like I do think that he is kind of like
a little impulsively, like,
but like
really
always
good.
For the best reasons, like
Absolutely.
ready to defend honor, ready to like do that.
Very deeply good.
But I don't think maybe I'm sure you could. I'm sure it falls apart. But this particular story.
Mm-hmm. Another of my favorite stories from the Book of Acts is Peter's vision that he gets in, what is the little coastal town he's in? I can't remember. But Joppa, yeah. So he's in Joppa, which is a coastal city.
At the house of Simon the Tanner.
And God gives him this vision. So Peter's a good Jewish boy, and he knows all of the dietary laws and follows them. And so in this dream, he sees this sheet coming down from heaven. Yes. Magically.
It's a vision,
sure. But it's full of animals, and it is full of both clean and unclean animals. It lists a bunch of them. Now I can't remember any of them.
I think lizards are definitely one.
Why? They're an unclean animal. So all these different unclean animals, which like for a person who is very devoted to their Jewish faith, like clean and unclean animals do not go together. And the voice says, like, get up, Peter, kill and eat. And he says, oh, absolutely not. I couldn't possibly, like, this is... nothing unclean has ever touched my mouth. Mm-hmm. And God says to Peter, like...
3 times.
3 times, yeah, repeatedly. That's what Peter does, 3 times. Always 3 times. God says, what I have made clean, you will not call profane. Mm-hmm. And so what it's telling the story of is Peter's mission to the Gentiles and the gospel mission to the Gentiles. Mm-hmm. So that the gospel is not for just the Jewish people. It is for Jews and Gentiles. It is for all people. Yeah. And like, how much like that is Arthur with his deep love of muggles and their artifacts. Mm-hmm. But like, it is always Arthur's impulse to save everyone, right? To protect everyone. It's not just about his family or the wizards or Harry. Like, it is about, he's such a caretaker of all people and wants all people to be included.
Well, and the thing that happens immediately next in that story is that Peter goes to Cornelius' house and they sit down and they share a meal, and Arthur goes and takes Hermione's parents and just wants to go to the Leaky Cauldron and sit down and like have a drink, have a meal, and chat. Like, always willing to. I mean, in this space where in Diagon Alley, like wizarding land, he's still willing to step across that line that is so not just crossed over
right.
easily.
And we know that other wizards weren't like that with them.
Right.
Right? I mean, they weren't all as hostile as Lucius, but like they weren't
what are you doing
friendly
here?
to muggles.
Our space, agreed.
Right.
Yeah. And but that's not Arthur.
Love Arthur.
Anyway, so all the Weasleys.
All the Weasleys.
Except for
we
Percy.
love them. Except for Percy, he's awful.
I have a new appreciation for them in this time through the books.
Yay for Weasleys. Well, thanks for joining us for another episode of Pontificating Potter with the Pastors.
Yes.
We'd love to know your biblical Harry Potter crossovers.
Yes, so this Sunday, which is the 28th,
Yes.
is the last day to log points. So
So.
make sure you do it.
Yay!
All right.
Bye.
Bye.